Everyone, to the online meeting of RBKC's licensing subcommittee, and thank you for attending. I'm Councillor Sof McVeigh, and I'll be chairing this meeting. It's being held via Microsoft Teams, and it's also being streamed live. The case before us today is an application for a grant of a premises licence for Layla Bakery in 332 Portobello Road, W10. And the committee for this hearing comprises of myself and fellow councillors, Councillor Schmetterling and Councillor Wason. Could you please introduce yourselves and also let us know about any declarations of interest, please?
Good morning. My name's Councillor Ian Wason. I'm a councillor in Camden Ward, and I have no declarations of interest.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetterling, I think you're on mute.
Good morning. Let's try again. I'm Dory Schmetterling. I'm councillor for Pembridge Ward, and I have no interests to declare in this matter.
Thank you. And I'm Councillor McVeigh, and I'm councillor for Brompton and Handstown, and I have no interest in this matter either. Also, as we're a virtual meeting, I may lose connection, and the quorum for this meeting is 2. So I'd like to elect a substitute chair. So I'd like to nominate Councillor Schmetterling. Councillor Wason, would you second this?
I'm happy to second.
Fantastic, thank you. So that's agreed. A few ground rules. Please keep everyone on mute until you're invited to speak. Up to you if you want to use your camera or not if you're speaking. And easier if you keep your mobile phones on silent. Thank you. And remember, this is a live meeting and the chat function will not be operating because obviously people watching cannot then partake in it. Everyone should have received the procedure for this meeting if you lose your connection or about how to get back in. So I'll just briefly run through the procedure. And then when I get to you, if you could please introduce yourself and just to confirm you are here would be great. So first of all, we have the case presented by our licensing officer, and that's Mr. Paul Phelan today, I believe, yes?
Good morning, Jay. Yes, you're correct.
Fantastic. And then after that, we will have the applicant presenting his submission, and that's Mr. Faulkner. You here, please?
Yes.
Fantastic. And then what happens is the committee will ask questions to Mr. Faulkner, and then the other parties attending today can also ask questions, and it is questions only at that stage. Thank you. And then, because we do have a responsible authority here today, we have noise and nuisance. We have Mr. Mahaffey, I believe.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. I'm here.
Thank you. And then again, the committee will ask questions and other parties will ask questions to him. And then we go to the objectors. We have several objectors attending today and they will all be able to do their submission. We have Councillor Pat Mason.
Morning, Chairman. Good morning.
Fantastic. You're here. And I also see, although not on the list, we also have Councillor Sinalari. Are you here? Are you speaking or not?
Hi there, I'm here. I submitted a written objection.
Councillor Mason's on mute.
I can yield to...
I'm not on mute.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear. Councillor Smettling, please, can you not interrupt? I'm trying to hear what Councillor Lowry is saying.
Hi there, I submitted a written objection, but I'm happy to yield to Councillor Mason to conduct the oral bit. We're on the same page here as it stands anyway, so that's absolutely fine.
Okay,
Chairman,
understood. That's great.
Chairman, can I just say that Councillor Larry, who hasn't done too many of these hearings, he does have a right to speak to his objection if he wishes to.
Fantastic. Let's see how it goes when you do yours and see if he wants to jump in. Fantastic. And then we have Huda Ali. Are you here, please, Huda?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Fantastic, thank you. And Lawrence Berg, I believe we're still waiting for, is that correct? Anne?
Yes, Chairman, we're still waiting.
You hear me?
I can hear you, Councillor Smettling, yes. You can't hear us, is that an issue? Okay, we'll carry on until we'll just keep going with the introductions. And then we have Thea Montgomery Anderson, are you here, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. And then once you've all submitted your representations, and you'll have up to a certain, we normally allow 10 minutes to do this, but please don't repeat what other people have said. Thank you. And then the committee will ask questions to you, and then other parties will also be able to ask questions to you. And then after that, we will turn to our legal officer. We have Lindsay Lemazurier with us today.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. And she will deal with any questions that have arisen, particularly legal ones, but also regarding any conditions. And then finally, we will turn to our governance team and also the licensing team to see if anything has come up. And Anne, please, if you could have notify me of any hands are coming up. I notice your hands coming up, but if I do, will you please let me know?
My hand has just come up because Councillor Schmetterling has asked if we could just hold for a minute while he rejoins the meeting to hopefully sort out the sound problem.
Perfect. So we'll just have a brief pause. We won't do a formal adjournment.
Yes, just a brief pause, please.
Fantastic. And well, I'll just finish saying what we're doing because obviously Councillor Schmetterling knows the procedure. And then after that, after we've looped back in with all the various different officers, we will then the meeting will close. And the committee will go into a closed session and we will not announce a decision today. The decision will come out within 5 working days. A summary decision will come out within 5 working days. Thank you. So we'll just pause for a few minutes and Anne, you'll let me know when he comes back on, yeah? Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
Hello, can you hear me? That's the question.
Yes, Councillor Schmetterling, I can hear you. Can you hear me clearly? It's Anne from Governance.
Yes. Okay. Super. I mean, I might have a device. I don't know what went wrong there, but I could see everything clearly. But I couldn't hear a thing. So now I can hear you.
You're back with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. We're still live.
Sorry about that.
So thank you. We can hear you and see. You can turn your camera off now if you like, because we're now going to continue. Thank you. And we are going to turn straight away to Paul Phelan, please, to outline the case for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Today's application has been submitted by Mr. Thomas Faulkner for the grant of a premises licence at Layla Bakery, 332 Portobello Road, London, W10 5 RU. The application before you today is for a premises license that seeks to permit the sale by retail of alcohol on the premises Monday to Sunday from midday until 10 p.m. This application has attracted a representation from Mr. Keith Mahaffey, an area senior officer within the council's environmental health noise team, on the grounds of the prevention of public nuisance. A summary of Mr. Mahaffey's representation can be found on page 3, with a full copy attached at Appendix C, pages 21 to 22. A further 19 representations have been received which oppose this application. This includes 2 representations from local ward councillors and a petition containing 36 signatures. A summary of these representations can be found on pages 4 to 7, with copies attached at Appendix D on pages 24 to 62. Council records indicate that at the time this report was written, the premises had received 1 complaint. However, there have since been 2 additional complaints. The issues raised within these 2 complaints are primarily focused on staff and customers smoking and alcohol being consumed without a licence. Officers from the noise team have confirmed that the nuisance issues are being monitored. The issue of alcohol consumption was looked into by a licensing officer, and the officer found no evidence of alcohol on site. No further complaints have been received since the 29th of April 2021. Council records also indicate that no temporary event notices have been submitted in respect of the premises within the preceding 24 months. Finally, I would like to draw the attention of the committee to the additional paper 5, in which the applicant proposes 2 additional conditions as part of their application and provides clarity as to the closing time of both the indoors and outdoors area of the premises. That concludes the summary of this application. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. So everyone will see on the screen the latest hours applied for. Is that correct, Mr. Phelan? You're happy with what's on the screen now?
That is the document I referred to, and it does propose 2 conditions and also provides clarity as to when the premises shall close and customers should have departed. So it does provide clarity to that point.
Thank you. And while we have you, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions to clarify this, because there has been quite a lot of late papers kind of rushing around. Sorry, who's controlling the screen today? Is that Esme? Thank you.
It's Laura.
Laura, hi Laura. Thank you.
Hello.
Could we please just go to the plan of the proposal with the red lines on? Normally we would do this with the applicant as well, but I just thought, seeing we have Mr. Phelan on now, we'll just ask him. Thank you. And Mr. Phelan, in your experience as a licensing officer, the quite large red line area on the outside, is that something you see often or not really?
It is something that could be seen on applications that want to license an external area. It's not essentially, it is a common feature on applications that look to license outside areas. It's one of the ways that we do receive that sort of information. So on an application, if we do see a red line that extends beyond the perimeter of the premises, then we would consider that to be the external area being licensed.
Okay, and the other option for serving alcohol outside would be not to have that red line, but to have an off sales. Is that the other way?
That would be that's correct, Chair. Yes.
Okay, and there's no preference in your view on this?
Not from the initial application process. From when it's assessed, it's pretty much the assumption that first of all what's been applied for is possible, and then secondly it's understandable in that we know what the application is for, so we don't want any sort of doubt. So if there is a red line that does extend beyond the premises, then we may still question it as just a matter of course.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And again, just for clarity, while we're here, the outside tables and chairs comes under a different act. It comes under the Highways Act, not the Licensing Act. Is that correct, Mr. Phelan?
Again, that is correct, Chair, yes.
Yes, so because I noticed in many of the representations there's been talk about the outside tables and chairs, the furniture, and we're talking now about the serving of alcohol on those bits of furniture, correct?
Absolutely, Chair. It's a license for the sale by retail of alcohol.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying that. That is great. So we will obviously come back to you when we have any extra questions. So thank you. So now we'll go on to the applicant, please. Mr. Faulkner, would you like to present your submission? You have up to 10 minutes to do it, and please bear in mind that the committee has read all the papers, but please highlight and clarify any points you want to draw our attention to. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom from Layla Bakery, and next to me here is my wife, Tessa. Our business is located at 332 Portobello Road in Ladbroke Grove. My wife and I started the business last year, having lived in the local area for the last 3 years. With experience working for similar businesses in central and east London, we wanted to create something in our local community in West London. Opening a new independent retail business during a pandemic has not been without its challenges, but we are desperately trying to build a successful enterprise. We have taken over a commercial unit which had been vacant since it was constructed several years ago and which had planning consent for restaurant and cafe use. That's use class A3. Layla is a sourdough bakery and cafe using high quality, nutritional and environmentally friendly ingredients to create delicious food and drinks. All of our products are made by hand on site at the bakery by our skilled kitchen team. We have already created 13 jobs, a mixture of part-time and full-time roles, since opening less than 2 months ago, with many of our staff local residents within the borough. All of our staff are paid the London living wage as a minimum. To create a sustainable business model which can continue to pay our staff and employ even more, we wish to incorporate an evening offering to the bakery, something which many of our friends in the bakery community in London and beyond are offering. Examples of these are shown on the schedule of images that was provided to the committee. We aim to source a small number of organic wines as well as bottled beer brewed by Portobello Brewing just down the road in W10. We wish to serve these premium products alongside our own bread, together with some olives and English charcuterie. We wish to create a relaxed atmosphere for locals and others to enjoy a drink and a snack in the afternoon and early evening. We have a small number of tables outside, 3 trestles on Bonchurch Road pavement and 2 bistro tables on the Portobello Road pavement, all permitted under licence from LVKC, as well as a maximum of 16 seats inside. This will not be a venue for drinking large quantities of cheap alcohol in large groups, but rather small groups there to appreciate good food and having a drink. We understand a small number of local residents, including those present, have concerns regarding potential noise issues and also customers not leaving the area after closing. Now, we recognise that Portobello Road, whilst being one of the London's busiest shopping and eating destinations, it's also a residential area. And we would like to have friendly relations with all of our neighbours and know that means we must be respectful at all times. We have taken on board concerns raised and have proposed that the premises will close outside by 10 p.m. and inside by 10:30 p.m, 30 minutes after the end of sale of alcohol, which is actually 2 hours earlier than Chikari's restaurant across the street, also below residential dwellings. We will ensure all customers vacate the premises once we close by removing all drinks and glasses, not selling alcohol for takeaway use, turning off external lighting, and providing encouragement from our staff who will be able to assist with customers' onward travel arrangements, if required. The outdoor seating will only be used on warm evenings, which sadly seems to be all too infrequent, having had, I think, the wettest May on record, I believe. But it is anticipated to be in use during the months of May through to October, and any particularly warm evenings outside of those months. We have put in place an operational management plan and dispersal policy, which have been shared with the committee, and we've written to local residents to share our aspirations for the business and demonstrate how we will prevent any issues from occurring which would go against the licensing objectives. As residents of Bonchurch Road ourselves, Tessa and I would like to see the area remain a relaxed and safe place to live. We know that a few residents are concerned that Layla will bring a return to the area of people who frequented the former cafe at 330 Portobello Road across the street. We want to assure those residents that our offering is very different to what existed at the former cafe, and all of our staff are trained to implement the dispersal policy effectively so as not to cause noise and nuisance for local residents. Any crime or antisocial behaviour will be reported to the police. We're operating on a very small scale, and the evening atmosphere that we would have is one of relaxed enjoyment. Given the extremely limited and premium alcohol offering, 10 p.m. closure of the outside seating, and comprehensive management and dispersal policies, we are confident that the impact caused to local residents will be minimal. We have been overwhelmed by the support shown to us by the local community since we launched, including for the proposed evening offering, and are optimistic about our future in this characterful part of London. We thank everyone for their engagement with the application.
Thank you for that, Mr. Faulkner. That was very interesting hearing you outline your plan. Can I just kick off with a couple of questions, if I may? Your experience is primarily as running a bakery, is that correct?
That is correct. So I'll just hand over to my wife, Tessa.
Yes, hi there. My background and experience is working in hospitality, and I have worked at a restaurant for 4 years where I ran that.
Okay.
And that was a licensed restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
That was and was it a managerial role, or what kind of role did you have?
It was
there?
a managerial role, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And I know you've sent some additional papers about what you're proposing, but I'm not quite clear what you mean by the supper club. If you could just expand on that a bit, please. Thanks.
So the idea is we aren't a restaurant, we're a bakery cafe, but we have been in that industry, and we would like to welcome young up-and-coming chefs who are working at restaurants or who don't have full-time employment to host evenings at the bakery. These will be ticketed events to showcase their skills, and it'll provide, notices will be put up in the bakery, and locals will be able to buy tickets for those events and sample different cuisines. So my cousin, for example, is a chef at an Italian restaurant, and she will come and host occasional evenings there.
Okay, understood. Thank you. And with this in mind, you haven't applied for any TENs. I'm just curious as to why you've not applied for any TENs to test this out.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to, cause any issues. What we wanted to do was establish the bakery and establish the evening offering, and at the same time, it makes sense to submit, it as a single license application.
Okay, thank you. I might come back with some more questions, but that's great for me now, and I'm just going to move over to my fellow committee members. Councillor Wason, do you have any questions?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Thank you, Tom and Tessa. That was a very measured and considerate presentation, I thought. You've clearly read the objections. My questions are, I've got 3 questions. One is just to clarify your Sunday trading proposal. Is it 10 o'clock and the same as the other weeknights, or the same as the weeknights, or is it 7 o'clock? Because there were 2 messages that came through on that. So just to clarify that, that's the first one. Second one is your outdoor seating, particularly on off Portobello Road on Bonchurch. What do you do when you finish for the day? How do you make those seats unusable? Because obviously that would be a concern to residents if they were left as is. And once you were closed, anyone could sit there and drink and talk. And the third thing is the folding doors. Can you just talk us through what your sort of proposal is to do on the folding doors, because that may alleviate some of the noise from inside? Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Wason. So in response to your questions, Sunday trading when we applied for the license originally, we kept it, consistent throughout every day. But on reflection, we are happy, and as we said in our operational management plan, to revise that to 7 p.m. On a Sunday. So that can be updated. Apologies for
so last orders at 6:30, close at 7.
Correct.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
In response to your second question, all the outdoor seating is removed at the end of the day and placed inside the bakery unit overnight. So it's not possible to be used outside of opening hours.
And that's outdoor seating and tables, or just the seats? And
correct. Outdoor, the tables,
tables,
folding tables, which are brought inside.
Okay. Okay.
In relation to the bifold doors, clearly it creates an open feeling inside. On a nice day, it's great to have that open air. But we recognise that that it is a residential area, and we are open to having a close of that at say 9:30 p.m. At the end of the day. So that's 1 hour before closing of the inside the premises.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wason. That was helpful. Just to clarify, so even those large benches on Bonchurch Road, the large tables, you take those indoors?
That's correct, Chair.
That's essential to know. Thank you for clarifying that. That was very useful. Councillor Schmetterling, questions, please.
Thank you. Just take my hand down first before I forget. Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Faulkner, for the various answers. I would like to first of all follow on from the question about the tables on Bonchurch Road, particularly. You know that one of the objectors, who is in fact appearing today, so I can mention the name, it's Huda Ali, plus you've read the objections anyway, has alleged people sitting there in the early hours. So, I don't know. I call it an allegation at this point. And so it really is important that nobody sits there. So you're saying, as a first question, that they have been removed since you got the pavement license. They've been removed by 10 p.m. every day.
Absolutely. They're currently removed around 3:30 p.m. But when if and when the license is approved, they will be removed by 10 p.m. They will be indoors by 10 p.m.
Thanks very much. We can always explore that, I suppose, with the objector. The other thing is regarding a potential smoking policy. At least one of the objectors has complained about smoke wafting up from the Bonchurch Road frontage. And I can imagine if you don't smoke, you'll be very sensitive to smoke. So anyone, I mean, potentially on a second floor, can smell smoke wafting up. So what would be great would be if you could implement a smoking policy, i.e. direct people to an area where they could smoke, and maybe also I know this could be difficult, but to limit the number of people at any one time outside your door, as it were, smoking. For example, keeping them only to Portobello Road, which is probably not as sensitive as Bonchurch Road. What do you think of that?
Thank you for the question. So we'd be very keen to put in place a no smoking policy for a policy where smokers have to be located away from the building, and we can work on a specific location which causes the least problems. Clearly, we're outside is public pavement, so we're unable to stop members of the public from lighting a cigarette. But certainly, our staff can be instructed, and our customers who are seated at the tables can be instructed that it's a no smoking area.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. There is obviously a limit to what one can do legally, legitimately, but I think the important thing is that you do have a smoking policy, and perhaps when you've drawn it up, you could submit it to the council so we can have it on record. Well, maybe in the discussion later we can come to it. On your operational plan and dispersal policy, I was just wondering about your comment about people being expected to use licensed taxi services. Obviously, there's a good intention behind there, obviously, but I'm not sure why you wouldn't want people to come in their own cars if they can. But at least you mentioned that you will make sure that these waiting vehicles don't leave engines running and slam doors and so on, especially late at night. Well, late in the day, after say 7 o'clock or something. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all really I have at the moment. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Schmetterling. Just going to turn to other parties for any questions. This is questions at this time. So first of all, Mr. Mahaffey, do you have any questions for the applicant, please?
Madam, I have no questions in regard to this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pat Mason, do you have any questions, please?
Yes, Chair, just a couple. Thanks for your lead-in, Tom. It's good to see businesses coming up after COVID, as long as they will be respectful of residents. Yeah, in the application, you of course say it's going to be an artisan bakery and a wine tasting event in the evenings. So the question is, will you be running both of these events, or will there be will the premises be hired out to private operators sometime in the evening for whatever throughout the year? Because that would mean you have to do more enforcement, as it were, and would that then mean tens added to that? Because if private operators quite obviously want to do things into the evening, so that's the first question. And secondly, on staff training, which of course dovetails into the other policies of dispersal and the operational management plan. Operational management plans and dispersal policies are only as good as your ability to enforce them, and of course enforcing them is important, because it means you can run an operation free of residents' complaints. Now, there are usually, I don't know what your staff turnover will be like, but in most premises, there is staff turnover, and the staff primarily don't see themselves there unless you make it a rule. They don't see themselves there to enforce licensing policies. I actually am a member of the licensing committee myself, and quite often you find that that they're not training staff, and if they're training staff at the point of license here, for example, they're not subsequently. There's no ongoing training program for new staff, and that then means that you have a problem, because enforcement officers will come along and find all kinds of things wrong, and the residents will complain, and you don't want to be back here. So those two questions: will you be running all of the events there, or will there be a private element to it, and that may well equal tens? And how will you control that? How can you enforce your dispersal policy and management plan on that? And then the staff training thing, which is just as important, because as I say, it's staff turnover, and staff are there to make money for you, of course, but by selling goods. They quite often don't. The businesses quite often don't see themselves there to be enforcing licensing policy. But it's going to be important for your business. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. In response to your first question, we will not be hiring out the premises. We will not be handing over responsibility to other private individuals and businesses. We will be managing any event that takes place, just partnering with chefs and partnering with with individuals. So we will be managing any event. We will not be requiring, assuming that our application is successful, we will not be requiring tens unless for a specific event outside of the hours permitted. So our staff will be in action at all of those events and managing those. In relation to staff training, we have got a small team. We've been very selective in choosing members of that team. Some of them are family members, so they we know these people extremely well, and there is regular training that takes place. We live approximately 200 meters away from the bakery, and are on site most of the time. Almost seems like sort of an extension of our home. We will ensure that our dispersal policy and management policies are part of the staff training program, and have regular updates with them. And we've also set up spreadsheets for various things like complaints, any issues with regard to underage, potential underage drinking, etc. Sorry, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, there was just one more, Chairman, if I may indulge, was about you mentioned not respecting local people, etc. And you will have a point of contact, but of course all licenses have a point of contact. One would hope eventually you will build a good rapport with most local people, and hopefully, if you are granted this license, where even some of the people who are objecting, although we will hear their case, but of course it's important that people are not in a position where they feel they have to object for whatever reason. So you will. How do you see this evolving in terms of, because of course to involve the local community in the way that you said you started to do will mean you will become part of the local community. How do you, is that a central part of your plan right now?
Absolutely.
How does that, yeah, and how will that speak to possible the sort of objections you're hearing in their objections now at this hearing?
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Yeah, we already feel very much part of this community. We live in it. We have had an amazing response to date. Whilst we recognise that bringing a business to a previously vacant unit brings people there that weren't there before, and I totally recognise the concerns that people have. We are here to stay. We are absolutely part of this community. We want everyone to be on side. This is not a this is not a pub. This is a relaxed place to come and have a drink, and we very much hope that that local residents, including those on this call this morning, would like to come and sample our food, and yes, absolutely, it's integral to our enterprise as a local business serving local people.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Mason, for those questions. That got a lot of extra information out, which is always the point of these hearings. So thank you. I see that our legal advisor has her hand up. Ms. Murray, what would you like to say?
Thank you, Chair. Whilst Councillor Mason brought up the issue of tens, I just wanted to clarify with the applicant. In your additional submissions, you referred to your evening supper menus ending at 2400 hours midnight. I just wanted to make it clear that the licence you've applied for is from midday to 10 p.m. I know you said you revised it till 7 p.m. on Sundays, but you wouldn't be able to serve alcohol between 10 p.m. and midnight. You need to apply for a tens or a licence variation. Will you understand that clear, that you understood that?
Yes, I did understand that. Thank you. That it was just that the event might go on until that time, but there would be no alcohol served beyond the permitted time.
Perfect. Thank you. That's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. But then on that note, if the committee were minded to grant this application, we'd need to consider opening hours, which also brings us back to what you said at the very beginning about that there was a planning permission for this premises, which has remained empty since it was built, for A3, which is restaurant cafe use. Though, of course, planning permission now has become much more flexible with the new Class E. But the hours, I've just asked our licensing officer to see if he can find out what the hours for the planning permission were, because that may also need to be taken into account if we are discussing what you said, that you wanted to stop serving alcohol at a certain time but then still remain open. So we'll loop back and get some more information on that through the course of this hearing. And I just want to also just amplify what Councillor Mason was saying about community relationships, and I think that is absolutely essential, and I really appreciate him bringing this to our attention, because just yesterday we were in a hearing with another party which ended up is now, as a result of a hearing, had fantastic community relations with some of the objectors. So we always like to see positive results out of these. So thank you, Mr. Councillor Mason, for bringing that to our attention. So now, other objectors, do you have specific questions, please, for the applicant? I'll just go through the list. Councillor Lowry?
No further questions on my end.
No, fantastic. Huda Ali, do you have any questions at this stage?
Not at the moment.
Thank you. And Thea Montgomery Anderson, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. So we discussed things about the smoking. Can you hear me, by the way? Yes, no?
Yes,
Can
yes,
you hear me?
please carry on.
I
Yes,
know I had problems earlier. Okay, so as you said, that you cannot control people who smoke on the street. Now, currently, I have brain damage, by the way, and I depend on assistive technology. I am directly opposite your premises on Bonchurch Road on the ground floor. So that means your customers already come across with their coffees and smoke outside my property. Then that means I can't use my assistive technology to do my work. So I then have to ask them to move, which disturbs me. And then I will have to stop recording what I'm doing. Your staff do the same thing, and I've asked them to move. And what happens is that customers look at how the staff behave and they just follow suit. Now, you've told me that you cannot stop people moving around different parts of the pavement. So how do you propose preventing them from coming and smoking and chatting outside my windows, and so that the noise doesn't come through the grates and wake me up? The other thing I'd like to know is how you propose, when the taxis come late at night, that they don't wake me up again, because those taxis with their engines running or even pulling up might only have a very small studio flat, although it's not social housing and I own it. It is very small, and I can hear what's going on in my bedroom if somebody bangs the door outside my front door, and I've already spent £30,000 on soundproofing. How do you propose to deal with those issues so as not to inconvenience me as a disabled woman? Do you want to answer that question before I pick on some other things that you had to say?
Thank you for your question and your concerns. I have instructed all staff, since being made aware of the issues that you raised in the process of this application. I've instructed all staff not to smoke outside or the pavement outside your property, and we will be discussing, Tess and I, a suitable location for staff smoking and break areas. As you said yourself, there is a public pavement outside of your property, and people who are unrelated to the bakery or customers leaving the bakery are able to walk in public areas, and I cannot stop them from walking past your property. But we will make sure that our staff are all trained and are reminded that to be respectful of you and to keep distance from the front of your property. In relation,
okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, no, another question there, and then you will get on to do your representation in a minute. So questions.
No, yeah, I have multiple questions. So he says at 9:30 p.m. is when he would like the alcohol to stop being served outside. That seems unreasonable to me, because at 9 p.m. I'm not allowed to put on my washing machine because of noise. So if residents are under like council regulations, not allowed to put on washing machines after 9 o'clock, it seems unreasonable to have alcohol on a residential street, which is Bonchurch Road, to be served at 9:30 p.m. at night. Really, that should be stopped being served at say 8:30, tables and chairs in by 9. So the residential street is respected for like the no washing machine noise. It is, unfortunately for you, you've chosen to rent a premises underneath social housing. So the Equality Act applies. Now, the Italian restaurant you mentioned across the road is underneath private housing. The Equality Act would only apply there to residents like myself who are disabled. So by choosing the premises you've chosen, you've also chosen to make things like the Human Rights Act and the Equality Act apply to your premises, because the catalyst are the freeholder, and legally you are just tenants, you are just guests on their land. So those laws are also applying to you, so you'd have to respect them. How do you intend to do that?
Thank you. I'm going to just jump in here because I think we're getting into all sorts of different legal laws and acts here, which we are the licensing committee here and looking at the Licensing Act. So I'm going to bring our legal advisor in here just to give us a bit of clarity, please, on this. Lindsay, do you have any comments about?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Whilst I agree that the Equality Act 2000 and all human rights legislation, its overarching duty, which the entire council needs to have regard to, this application mainly focuses on the licensing objectives, of which there are 4, and obviously any objections raised can be considered in the round by the committee. And obviously, if the committee felt that conditions could be placed on a licence which ameliorated the objections, then that is one option. And obviously the committee can refuse a licence as well. So yes, all legislation does need to be taken in the round, but obviously we are focusing on the licensing objectives here.
Thank you for that. And regarding the noise and nuisance, maybe when Mr. Mahaffey comes to his representation, he can shed a bit of light on that for everybody regarding the noise and nuisance under the Environmental Health Act. Any other questions, please? There.
Okay, just let me go back through my notes. Sorry, 3 years and small groups. Sorry, give me a second. I've got brain damage. So I have to make notes as I go. Bear with me.
No, that's fine. Don't worry at all. It's always quite odd doing it actually like this. Do feel free if you want to come back and ask a question, and maybe you can ask a question as part of your submission if that helps.
Okay, that's what I can always do.
So yeah, so okay, don't feel this is your only chance. So
yeah, I did have some questions because they had some notes they handed in with red, which were sent round by email, and I wanted clarification on those. Because one of them said reasonable steps for basically for it was a reasonable steps and my point was that I wouldn't like reasonable steps. That doesn't give me certainty. I would prefer that if there was a guarantee that if we had 3 incidents recorded on CCTV or photographs that the people hadn't been dispersed properly, for instance, that then the license would be revoked. That would be reasonable to me. And the other thing is on point 23, he says 22 to XXX, seating area kept clear. I would like him to clarify what time XXX is. And then point 8, 9 p.m. Yeah, that was the bit I said about, yeah, we've already clarified that. And then 21, dispersal policy. Residential street, there should, my point is that a dispersal policy is the sort of thing one would expect to see in a nightclub, a bar. This is a residential street. If you do want to serve alcohol, by all means do that on Portobello Road, but don't be doing it on Bonchurch Road, which is a residential street. I don't see the need for a dispersal policy on a residential road after 4 or 5 o'clock in the day. But I would like those, what I'm saying. But the XXX one, point 23, can you clarify the time that you should have put in there?
I'm not quite sure which. I see the screen is slightly kind of jumping around. I think it's this page.
Okay, so yeah, that might be that page.
Let's just go slowly.
23.
That's it. Point 23.
23.
So this sheet of paper in front of us is conditions, I believe, created by our legal team. Is that right, Lindsay? So Lindsay, do you want to jump in here? Thank you. So I think
yes. Sorry, can you go to the top? Some of the conditions. if you look at all the different headings, so the wording is wording in which we will discuss at the end of this session, so it's not for now. So if you look at the top bit, this is conditions proposed by the applicant, and I've kind of tweaked the wording in red, whereas I've put in what the council's preferred conditions are. Then I've slotted in the conditions that noise and nuisance would like, and then I've kind of looked through the application and added in further possible conditions which we think might be relevant. And anything that crops up during this discussion can be taken on board. For example, smoking. All of this will be discussed at the end, and you can participate in that session as well. So this is just food for thought, and it can be commented on later on.
And I agree about just dispersal policy. Yeah, you're right. That is normally relevant to large restaurants or nightclubs, but because of the nature of the objections here, I think we were looking at the legal team was looking at a belts and braces approach to a dispersal policy. But as Lindsay said, we'll come back to that later. Any other questions? Yeah, not now.
Not at this stage, I think.
not
at this stage. That's fine.
Okay. Fantastic, thank you. And I just want to look back with Anne to check with Lawrence Berg. Has he ended up turning up to the hearing?
Hi, thank you. Good morning, Chair. We contacted Mr. Berg. Unfortunately, we don't have mobile numbers for anyone. He submitted an email address, and we have not heard back from him as yet, unfortunately. But he was sent all of the links and information in good time.
No, that's fine. Don't worry. And I just want to reassure everybody listening that even if an objector does not turn up to hearing, we obviously still take all the written objections incredibly seriously and as part of any decision-making process. But it's helpful always to have people at committee, because then we can always get a lot more information, which is the point of the hearing. So thank you for that. We're now going to move on. I've lost track of where we are, but we are now going to move on to we've done with all the questions now to the applicant. So the next stage of the procedure is we're now going to move on to our responsible authority, Mr. Keith Mahaffey, and his submission, please. Thank you. Are you good to go?
Yes, good morning, madam. Sorry about that. It's always a problem muting things. Clearly, my concern, I share an awful lot of concerns that residents have raised. The external area is extremely reverberant. Sound of voices, conversations, etc. can be reflected into neighbouring residential properties, and there can be a severe problem to them. The later it goes on, the greater that intrusion will be. Residents tend to want to sleep between the hours of 11 and 7, and before they sleep, they like to relax and unwind. And if you disturb them up until after 10 o'clock, then clearly that intrusion is sometimes very significant for them. Now, clearly the whole thing here is if the operation of the exterior is going to be till 10 o'clock in the evening, it has to be managed in such a way that it minimises its impact on residents. My view is that 10 o'clock is rather late for this location. And clearly, it's not a matter of a few people being outside. It's a lot of people being outside. It's like that you have doubled the actual capacity of the premises by being able to have external seating. Now, I have no issues with that. During the daytime, the background levels are high, and therefore the voices will not have the same impacts that they will have later in the evening when there's less people about. And clearly, in a lot of respects, I have concerns about that. But clearly, the tables and chairs licenses have been granted and people are permitted out there. It's purely the sale of alcohol. It's all to do with good external management. It's all to do with good liaison with residents. It's all about ensuring that if the premises is going to operate late in the evening, that they address the issues. There is no need for any form of complacency here. This has to be done at a high standard at all times, and it's very much up to Mr. Faulkner to prove that to residents. Now, alcohol sales will not be the main reason. People may be sitting outside for coffees, because I'm sure coffees will be sold up until 10 o'clock. And if there's no licensable activity taking place at 10 o'clock, then people can remain outside and take coffees up until 10 o'clock. So the impacts will be there, but it's the management. It's making sure that Mr. Faulkner understands the impacts that this can create on residents, and he addresses them. And clearly, it's a means of explaining to his staff what he wants, and he makes sure that he monitors and ensures that they comply fully with the external dispersal plan and the operational plans that he has submitted as part of his application. Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Mahaffey. That was a whirlwind going through that. Thank you. I think you made an interesting point there, because about the tables outside, and reminding everybody on this committee and this hearing that we are obviously primarily the alcohol licensing committee and late night refreshments, which is not effective here. But as you say, someone could still sit on those tables and have a cup of coffee up until the highways, pavement and highways license ends. So I have no questions specifically for you about anything, but I'm going to turn to my fellow councillors, Schmetterling and Wason, to see if you have any questions. Councillor Wason.
My apologies, sorry. No questions from my side.
Thank you. Councillor Schmetterling.
Thanks. Just one. Sorry, it was. Sorry, it really was a question for the applicant, but I suppose it's a very short one. Could put it here because it is connected with noise and nuisance. Would it be helpful for the applicant to actually post a telephone number, because in his operational management plan, sorry if I missed something in his presentation, but it does say there's a point of contact for local neighbours, and he is offered an email address. But like everywhere else, would you feel it's helpful if a telephone number were posted that residents can ring any time the premises are open?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'd be delighted to share my mobile telephone number with local residents, and we operate an open door policy. We are open for trading and also open for residents to come and talk to us. But yeah, certainly happy to share a mobile telephone number.
That will be publicly available, not just when people ask for it, but it's, like you said, an email address will be provided on display, so the phone number will be on display. I mean, the DPS could have that number. Are you the DPS?
Yes.
So your phone number should then be available as well for public viewing. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes,
that'll be noted. That'll be noted in the minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Schmetterling. So, any questions from the applicant? Would you like to ask any questions to Mr. Mahaffey?
No, thank you.
Great. And objectors, I'm going to again just go through. Councillor Mason, any questions for the noise nuisance?
Just one, probably, Mr. Mahaffey. I recognise what you've said obviously from many other hearings. I don't know if you were on the original tables and chairs license. They must have looked at the problem of nuisance, possible nuisance outside. I've no idea if you provided a report for that. The other thing is, I was just thinking about other similar areas where licensable premises are, and I wonder whether you think, and we should think about it, that albeit that everything may well be okay with management plans and dispersal policies and so on, whether such an area might attract the wrong kind of people who come to hang out, as it were. It's happened elsewhere. I don't know whether you've thought about that, or indeed the applicants has thought about that. Of course, we would have to deal with it if and when it happened.
Yes, we do get contacted by the tables and chairs colleagues about timings for these areas. At the end of the day, the whole issue here is a tables and chairs license is granted, then there is a revocation process if there are particular issues with it. I think it has to come back to committee for committee to make a decision on that. Clearly, the whole issue here is the fact that the operator of the premises has to be responsible in how he operates and basically manages the exterior of the premises. And clearly, Mr. Faulkner has to get those processes right. And I always think a good thing to do is basically to have CCTV outside and to keep reviewing that on a daily basis and to make sure that somebody manages it and keeps an eye on things. A lot of it really comes down to that. Tables and chairs outside, if they are monitored and managed, should be effectively policed to stop problems arising. But the problem is, it's when it doesn't happen, and that's a concern that I have. But I would suggest that Mr. Faulkner make sure that he has the right processes there. The tables and chairs are brought in so they don't attract people to stay in the area late in the evening. And if he can do that, I think that should minimise his impact on residents.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Huda Ali, any questions? Sorry, Councillor Mason, any other questions, Ms. Mahaffey?
No, I'll hold, Chairman.
Thank you.
Speaking.
Huda Ali, any questions?
Yeah, I just have this one question in regards to the tables and chairs licence, because I'm not sure how this works. But you know, in terms of the pavement licence, was there like a poster placed on the bakery window to sort of object to the pavement licence before it was given, like the alcohol licence? Because we weren't made aware of those benches that were being put out anyways.
Yep, I can answer this one because I have quite a lot of tables and chairs licenses in front of me as well. Yes, the new tables and chairs regime is authorised under the Business and Planning Act 2020, which was put in place as a result of COVID to help support businesses who've basically been shut down for the best part of a year. And it's a fast track process. It's mandated by the government, not by the council, and it's a 10-day turnaround time. And within that time, there would have been notifications. I recommend everybody should sign up to the email notification system on the council, and then you will get these notifications direct to your email. And yes, they would have put something up on their premises. And it's been, as you've seen, across the borough. We've had lots and lots of tables and chairs outside, which generally has been a positive thing after months of isolation and people sitting indoors by themselves, at last able to go outside and have a cup of coffee with their friends. So generally it's been very positive, but as Mr. Mahaffey says, it needs to be managed. So Huda, that is the process. It is separate from the Licensing Act. It's the Highways Act, but primarily the fast track approach falls under the Business and Planning Act 2020, mandated because of the effects of COVID.
So we were supposed to be notified that those tables and chairs were going to be out.
No, you're not supposed to be notified. If you had signed up to the email notification system, you would have been notified. And yes, there would have been something outside.
Email notification system where?
On RBKC. I can ask governance to send you a link later to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because and they were supposed to put like a poster up to say that there was going to be, that they planned for those tables and chairs to be put out on Bonchurch Road. Because
something along those lines.
I didn't see no poster on Bonchurch Road.
Well, I'm sorry, that's not part of what we're hearing today in the terms of what before us, this committee, but there should have been that application. I'm just explaining to you how the procedure works for those things.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So now, Thea, any questions for noise and nuisance?
Yes, in your experience, when there are issues, say, with drug dealers, how easy is that to deal with? I know, obviously, I've had my own experiences, and it was pretty horrific getting moved out of my house. But that was some years ago now, getting moved out of my house for 3 years. I now hear the Territorial Army came in to deal with Market Bar. Is that a deal that the council has going now with the Territorial Army? But when there are problems with drug dealers, they come in and deal with things? Or was that a one-off? What is the procedure now for these sort of problems? Because obviously there is no council CCTV which is monitored. They did put one up outside my house, which is why the police could take action, and arrests and stuff like that did happen with the previous place. next to my property. What is the procedure now? Is it easier to get CCTV put up? I mean, it took me 3 years of litigation and my tenant being threatened with gang rape before they put up CCTV. Are there new procedures in place? Because obviously I've not been litigating with the council since 2018.
What I would say here is, if you are feeling threatened, an awful lot of what you're discussing are not particularly noise and nuisance issues. They're issues with the police and with the council's what you call it, Stuart Priestley in the sorry, I've forgotten the community safety department. Sorry about that. And you need to be able to discuss that with them. We can only deal with noise and noise issues and the enforcement of statutory nuisance and the enforcement of the legislation in regards to licensing and things like that. But if there are the issues that you have described, then you really do need to speak to our community safety team and also your local police.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Thea. Thank you. I'm sorry to hear about that. Just to clarify, that seemed, from my understanding, I'm sure you'll talk about it in your representation, but that was the past issue and not to do with the current applicant and the current operator here now. And again, just to clarify, we have no representation from the police either about this applicant and this application. And as Mr. Mahaffey says, he is objecting on the issues of noise and nuisance and environmental health, not crime and police issues. And the police are very active. And just yesterday, again, on another hearing, the police were objecting. So if there was a concern, I think we would have heard from the police specifically. So any questions, please, from our legal team to noise and nuisance, please, Lindsay.
No questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next stage of the hearing, which is when we get to the objectors, please, to now do your representation. And if I could possibly ask you not to repeat what other people are saying, but to draw us attention to salient points you wish to amplify at this hearing, that would be fantastic. And Councillor Mason, you're going to start. Thank you.
By your leave, Chairman, could we hear from the resident objectors first? I'd like to hear what they've got to say.
Okay, absolutely fine, if that's okay. Huda Ali, are you okay to start?
Sure. So I've got two main concerns. One obviously was the one that Tia was talking about, which was the safety, but obviously we're not talking about that right now. It's mainly the noise issue. So we're residents in the building, and I'm sort of speaking on behalf of my family that live with me and also some of the neighbours in the building. They're really concerned about, so already when the bakery's opening at 8 a.m, we're already hearing like chatter, dogs barking. We're just sort of concerned about what that's going to be like when alcohol is going to be involved. So we already had the issue with the bakery, which was years ago, where they used to close at 10 p.m, but the men would just sort of stand around, just chatter all night. We barely slept. We couldn't open our windows in the summer months because that would interrupt our sleep. Those are sort of our main things, and we're just wondering how, I know they're trying to input a dispersal policy and all that, but how is that going to sort of work? And I don't really know what else to say, to be honest. It's just mainly the noise. Yeah, sort of that. I don't understand how.
No, Huda, I understand what you're saying.
You understand what I'm saying.
Yes, I understand, and I hear you, and I've read your objections as well, and I can understand that it must be concerning to have this change, the potential, well, this current change, because it obviously is a functioning bakery right now. Yes, I don't have any specific. Well, I suppose my specific question to you actually would be: so you mentioned I know it's very hard because obviously this committee we have to look at the current application, the current But I know that a lot of the objections were concerned because it was so bad previously.
Yeah.
So I don't want to focus too much on that.
Yeah.
But
so, like, for example, like you'd have so at the moment there's been some complaints submitted of just sort of people hanging around, drinking their coffee, not sitting, the tables and chairs sort of being moved, people just sort of standing around our apartment door, which we sort of find quite disrespectful, because they sort of we're the ones that are sort of living here in the area, and we just have to sort of put up with that kind of stuff. And we're just saying, like, if their alcohol is going to be served, how are they going to sort of control the people then if they're consuming alcohol, if they can't sort of control them when they're just drinking coffee?
Understood. So we need to really look at that, and we'll go back to, if the committee was minded to grant this, we'd have to be really look at the hours and look at the conditions, which we'll come back to. I think that is very important. Thank you. I see Councillor Schmetterling might have a question. Do you have a question, Councillor Schmetterling?
I do. Thank you. As always, let me get my hand down. There we are. Mr. Ali, thank you very much. I've got a couple of points to you. The first one is, this is in no particular order.
Yeah.
In your objection, you felt that there was noise pollution from customers conversing the early hours of the morning when they sit on large benches. But you heard Mr. Faulkner say that these benches are rendered unusable, or taken in, I can't remember, rendered unusable by 2200 hours. So how do you square that?
What do you mean by 2200 hours?
Well, the tables and chairs are gone or unusable by 10 p.m. But you've heard people or seen people there sitting there in the early hours of the morning, which means after midnight. So how do you square that with Mr. Faulkner?
Oh, so when I meant early hours in the morning, I sort of meant like 8 a.m., not like the early hours after midnight.
I see.
Yeah. So that's just to clarify that.
Okay, well, that may have to be considered, but anyway, that may be a point for Mr. Faulkner to, with his notice to, as he said, he's putting up a notice to remind his patrons that there are people living above the front of Conduit Street. The second thing is, I mean, how much are your fears allayed by, for example, Mr. Faulkner's agreement now, written agreement, to finish half an hour earlier? In other words, alcohol stops at 9:30 and everything's gone by 10, 6 days a week. Is that better than it was?
I mean, to be honest, I don't think that half an hour is going to make much of a difference. I think it's still too late till 9:30. And how can he guarantee that by 10 p.m. that's it, everything's gone? Like, okay, in the beginning, yeah, that might be the case, but months down the line, is that still going to be the case, or are we going to start having issues?
Well, either he clears the tables or he doesn't. When the tables are gone, nobody can sit there, right? So
no. But then
Okay.
what we're worried about is the fact that people are going to be hanging around. Like, yeah, they can say, okay, yeah, we're going to get them taxis or transport to go home, but we can't, like, he can't guarantee that.
Could I suggest, I'd like to appeal to you, and I'm saying this, I try to say this in every licensing hearing that I'm involved in, especially when people are concerned about noise and unreasonable hours, is complain to the council. And I hope this is minuted. Complain to the council.
Yeah.
We've got a few, well, you can see it from the record. There's not much. I mean, it's no good, saying, oh, there's noise at this hearing. What we need is evidence. Evidence is you have a noise issue, say at 2300 one evening, and it's clear it's people hanging around from the premises. That's difficult to prove, of course. It's a nice wide pavement on Bonchurch Street. It's very attractive looking.
Yeah,
you can prove it. Let the council know. There's a report a problem page just for this purpose. Send a video. Send a photograph. That's my appeal to you. At the moment, we don't really have much evidence, specific evidence of what's going on. So we can only hope that the measures that Mr. Faulkner has put in place or will put in place for the license, assuming we grant it, of course, that they are effective.
But when you're saying to show the evidence, I mean, obviously we're not going to be able to do that unless they get granted an alcohol license and open till 10 p.m.
Correct.
Exactly. So
if we grant a license, I mean, you can complain anyway. That's what the report of problem page is for. And there's a very specific one for noise and nuisance.
Councillor Schmetterling, I think you've made your point. That is really helpful, and thank you for that. And also along those lines, I'd also like to say the other thing we always try to say in committee, and Councillor Schmetterling has sat on many of these with me, is we always try to have objectors and applicants come together at some point, because the objectors are generally residents. You're not going anywhere. Generally, the applicant's not going anywhere either. So some kind of living together in some way has to come about. And so we always, if possible, try to encourage dialogue. And as I say, yesterday we had a very contentious case, and we encouraged dialogue 6 months ago, and it's got a bit better. So please bear that in mind. Thank you very much, Huda, for that. Councillor Waston, you didn't have any questions. No, does anyone else have any questions specifically for Huda, please? I'll just ask that now in the group. I will take silence as a no. Huda, thank you very much for your representation. That's much appreciated. And thank you for going first. Never easy.
Yeah.
Thea, would you like to go next, please?
Go next. Okay, so the objection I have is that from the off, the opening of this bakery seemed unlawful to us, the residents. With the table and chair application, it makes it clear on the council's website that there should be frontage, and the table and chair application should be applied to that in a prominent place. There was no frontage. The frontage didn't go up until after the 7 days of objections was over. The notice for the table and chair application was put in Bonchurch Road, not in Portobello Road, where there is significant footfall on a prominent place like a front door. So that from the off made us feel that things were not quite right. So people didn't have the opportunity to object for 7 days, especially those who were self-isolating for 10 days, as were the regulations during COVID. So that was the initial issue and why people are probably quite upset, because there is an extra long table and chair license. But this is a licensing meeting about alcohol, and I respect that. So if an alcohol license is granted and alcohol is being served on the street till 9:30 p.m. Now, currently, to let you know, because you guys don't live in this area, you can hear a pin drop on the street at 9 o'clock at night. It's a Muslim majority area, and the people in the street tend to go to bed quite early, much earlier than when I lived in South Kensington. It's a very different dynamic, and there's a lot of us who don't drink, and I include myself in that. I don't drink for health reasons because I have brain damage, but many people don't drink for religious reasons. And an alcohol license on a residential road, Muslim majority road, seems morally wrong as well. You wouldn't put a mosque in a Jewish road. And for 14 and a half hours a day, there are tables and chairs out on a residential road. Now, if you buy a property or rent a property on Portobello Road or Goulburn Road, which are commercial roads, then you know what you're getting. But if you rent a property or purchase a property, as I did on Bonchurch Road, then you expect on a residential road peace and quiet. There are a lot of people who have dogs on this road as well. So the noise will make the dogs bark off late at night, waking everybody up. Because it's a social housing area, there are a lot of 2 kids in 1 bedroom. So one child wakes up, the other child wakes up. One of the fastest ways out of poverty is education. You're going to affect their education. That seems morally wrong to me. There are private residents on this road like myself. I know that. The reason I moved into a social housing area is because I have brain damage, and I thought the council would understand the disability laws better. But actually I was healthier living in South Kensington. And yeah, the long and the short of it is I already have, because of the bakery now, significantly more cars and footfall outside my property. People take the coffees and sit around the back of my property on Munro Mews and drink them. That is not too bad during the day, because they take the tables and chairs in at about 4 or 5 o'clock. So it means if I'm having a bad day, I already have post-traumatic stress disorder from previous incidents. And because I have brain damage, I have a propensity to mental illness. That is not anything I can do anything about. It was dropped in my head when I was born. So that means that I need to use assistive technology. So after 5 or 6 o'clock at night, I then can do my work because the area is quiet again. So if you have people outside opposite my property till 10 o'clock at night making noise, you're leaving me no time to do any work because I have to sleep. So the other thing is there is litter caused by Layla Bakery. I could send you some photographs of litter, the Layla Bakery cups that are dropped behind my house that nobody picks up. The tables and chairs, the deck chairs are constantly being moved around to the Bond Church roadside. There's a blonde hair lady who I think is the manageress, maybe this man's wife, who walks past them. I've got a photograph of her doing it. She doesn't ask them to move the chairs. She just lets it go on. Now, if you can't control sober people, what chance do you have of controlling drunk people? And obviously, there is the crime that will bring to the area again. I have had a drug dealer contact me, knocked my front door, and asked me if it was true that they're going to be serving expensive wine there, and it's going to be a ripe corner to sell cocaine, and how I would feel about him doing it. And I literally burst into tears because it's the same thing all over again. And alcohol brings drugs to the area. I mean, people already smoke crack cocaine in the phone box. And the council took away the CCTV camera that had been put up that stopped that going on. People pull up in the 4x4s outside my house. I'm not getting involved in the police again, by the way, to report any of this. I had to move out of my home for 3 years, and I was on the move while I had a stalker who's now in prison. It was I've not enjoyed living here since about 2012, and I lived here happily from 2007. And my brain damage, I was put on medication that has made my brain damage really obvious, that now I can't work full time. Before I worked in the city and I was a lawyer. And the medication they put me on has triggered the bits that had been growing for me to cope with having auditory brain damage. And it's made it all very uncomfortable just for me as one resident. So for the rest of the residents, it's going to be really uncomfortable. And people would not have, as a Muslim, you would never move into a street where you think they're going to be serving alcohol. This is why you live on a residential road with lots of other Muslims in the same community. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Thea. I'm sorry my microphone wasn't on. I'm sorry to hear about all the situation you found yourself in. That's all I can say. I'm very sorry to hear that. And I do understand your concerns. I'm not sure if I have any specific questions. I'll have a think to see if I have any specific questions. I'm bearing in mind what our legal advisor said earlier about the licensing objectives, and obviously what you mentioned about the prevention of crime and disorder definitely is one of our licensing objectives. It sounds as if the previous area before the new flats and the new operation sounded quite unlawful. A lot of crime and disorder and drug dealing, so I'm really sorry to hear all that. And that is obviously a licensing objective, so we need to take that into account. I'm just going to turn to my fellow councillors to see if we have any questions for Thea, please.
No questions from my side. Thanks.
Well, Chair, I've got a query point to make to Ms. Montgomery Anderson. I presume you heard my response to the previous objector about complaints and so on, and indeed Mr. Faulkner has expressed his good intentions in the management of this premises. So do you not take some comfort from this?
Right, the last time I had to complain to noise and nuisance, I mean, I've got probably 100 complaints that I had to make to noise and nuisance, and the team is massively under-resourced, so we weren't able to come out most of the time. When a lady called Glynis came out, she had to bring dustbin men with her because she'd be threatened by the drug dealers. Now, if you look at what's going on at Porto Cafe, the ladies there are too frightened to work with the police or anybody else because they've been threatened by the gangs that if they do so, and bad things will happen to them. And everyone saw what happened to me. If you work with the police, your life's made into a hell. The only reason I survived is my fiancé is a sheikh and we have unlimited money. So the police told me to move out of the temporary accommodation the council put me in because there were leaks within the council and leaks within the police force. So I had to self-fund for 3 years moving around London whilst the man was charged with stalking and whilst the council, and my tenant, by the way, was threatened with gang rape and circled and spat at. Then the council finally put up a CCTV camera. So it's not a quick process. And by that time, my mental health was so destroyed, as was the mental health of many other people who lived in that block. And the block had been redeveloped, by the way. That new block was there while the cafe was still there and drug dealers were still hunting about. Now, the drug dealers were from Ravenscourt Park and we tracked them down, and some are in prison, some are kicked out of the country. But just as what's happened with Market Bar, the TA have come in to clear Market Bar. Well, new drug dealers are there from out of borough. So it's not a quick process. It does affect mental health. And you are in a particular street with a lot of social housing. And one of the reasons people get social housing is poor mental health. So there are autistic kids in the street. There are people with bipolar personality disorders, as well as the physically disabled. It's not just, and people who live on the poverty line often have a lot more stress And the properties here, I'm sad to say, as some of you know, I went protesting. They were very poor quality. Catalyst didn't manage the build properly. That's why their builders were fined £100,000 in court. And they're now having to put in, they've got the stress of not having proper fire alarms. So that's why you've got fire marshals from out of town, a fire brigade from out of town walking around the area. And there was a fire in a block one street down, which has stressed everybody out. So you've already got people that are very vulnerable. This isn't South Kensington where everyone's got nice soundproof properties and a lot of money to hire lawyers. This is a very poor area with a lot of people who don't speak English as their first language. For them, complaining is very hard. My door knocks constantly because I was a lawyer, and they ask me for help. That's very stressful for me. I think better prevention rather than cure.
No, Thea, thank you for that. I'm so sorry. Sorry, Councillor Smatty, I'm just intervening here. I think you've brought up a couple of things that we will follow up. And Anne, if you could please make a note to make sure Stuart Priestley is aware of this area. He's one of our officers in our community safety team, Thea, because no one wants to see a return to some of those horrendous situations you have described. And I'm really sorry to hear about all that. So Anne, if you could please make a note to email Stuart and just to make sure that the community safety team, and we have some new wardens now in the borough, and to make sure they keep an eye on the whole area. It sounds as if that would be very important. Thank you. Dory, any specific questions?
Yes, one question and one point. Following on from the problems that were mentioned, of course, I'm very sorry to hear that you've had to deal with all these issues, both health-wise and external influences. I just want to mention that in our statement of licensing policy, it is recognised that most, if not all, the roads in the borough are residential, but we can't stop premises opening. We can only try and control them. I just want to mention that. And my final question, I suppose, is because you raised a very important point there about litter. I'm just wondering if we ask the applicant to have a pavement sweeping policy, which a lot of premises have, whether that would then allay your concern about that aspect.
I would ask what time that pavement sweeping policy is going to be. I go to bed at 9 o'clock for health reasons, as do a lot of other people in this area. And how far the pavement sweeping policy is going to go. Is it going to go down as far as Munro Mews, where people sit on the mews and they sit? I mean, it doesn't really bother me, people sitting down on the mews having a tea and coffee. They want to do that. They want to do that. It will bother me when they're drunk and high on drugs. Not going to lie. And then I will have to. Sorry, we're talking about a sweeping. But what I'm saying is they're going to leave litter. So what time will they be doing the sweep? Now, if you're doing it after the tables and chairs at 9:30, people have stopped serving alcohol, 10 p.m., that noise of people sweeping will disturb people who are trying to sleep, like myself.
Well, of course, that would be before then. We can discuss that with, it's a good point. We can discuss that necessary with the applicant when we get round to that subject of conditions and so on and so forth. So thank you very much. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smatling. And just want to, if anybody else has any particular questions, please, for Thea. I think, Huda, you have your hand up. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So, just going back to is it Dory? About the complaints procedure. So we've obviously made complaints. I mean, so far in regards to the tables and chairs, there was one time when it was supposed to be investigated and they said that one of the officers went on a Monday and they didn't see any tables and chairs out. But obviously on Monday, the bakery's closed. So I just wanted to say that point. So we have complained. A lot of my neighbours have complained, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Noted.
We don't seem to have a record of a lot of complaints.
There should be quite a lot of emails have been sent. We've complained through the RBKC website. So we do know about the report a problem page. We do know about that. So, yeah.
Okay, well, Mr. Mahaffey, perhaps you can look into that and send around something about that afterwards, just to check that the processes are being followed. It's probably slightly premature to talk about too many complaint processes, because as you rightly said, Huda, they're not actually yet operating the alcohol. So it's a kind of catch-22 we're situation here right now regarding that. Any more questions specifically for Thea? And if not, then we'll move on to Councillor Mason to do your now you've heard the residents. If you want to do your representation.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. As I said in my submission, I objected to test how the applicant would satisfy the conditions that are eventually agreed, and that they do understand the points and objections that we've just heard from the resident objectors. Because, of course, as has been stated, we can't actually. I would like to sometimes, as some premises I sit on this committee, I'd like to close them down, but I can't because I've got a legal right to continue, and because all businesses have an effect on local areas just by the fact that they're there, and some residents in some areas didn't have them there before, and they don't want them there, but unfortunately they've got a legal right to be there. Now, as has been stated, Goulburn in this particular area is heavily residential. It is top heavy with children and young people, school. It's very family orientated. There are 40 different nationalities in North Kensington. I think that's reflected through some of the rest of the borough. There is a very large level now after a year of COVID of mental health problems. I know that's been spoken of before in different areas. My casework is 60% of the casework, whatever it is, I can see a mental health element in it, and the problems in these blocks and houses and streets is really at breaking point at the moment in every type of manner, from debt, mental health, people unemployed, and so on. So it's no mean feat opening a business, I suppose, in these circumstances. So I've always thought in the past, because it didn't always happen, that that we deal with all the issues here, so that as far as possible, the resident objectors are heard, and that as far as possible we can sort the problems here now. In many hearings that I've been to, of course, council committee members always say, well, of course, there is not enough evidence for whatever. Well, and of course, as Thea said, sometimes you take your life in your hands by talking to the police. In terms of licensing objections, you can make complaints to licensing at rbkc.gov.uk, which of course will be recorded. And I think the chairman mentioned the app. I can't remember what it was called, but of course the licensing committee works on recorded complaints. And if you have a lawyer for an applicant and you residents mention complaints that are not recorded, the lawyer will always say, well, if you thought it was bad enough, you would have made a complaint, which infuriates me. But that's normally what they say. We have, and I asked questions earlier on the dispersal policy, the management policy, and so on, and the trick is, can they enforce those and operate those, given that you can't stop them running the business, they operate those in a manner that doesn't cause all of the problems or substantially all of the problems that we've heard about from the objectors. The fact is that if you have a legal right to run a business, if a business operates in an area, it's going to have an effect. It's just a fact that X amount of people will come to an area, they will sit down, they will pay their money, they will, in this case, buy coffee, they will, if you grant this application, they will drink alcohol, they will arrive in cars or on foot or on bicycle. They will have an effect, and of course, Mr. Mahaffey spoke to the terminal hour. He spoke to he thought it was too late. There'd be a lot of people outside, etc. And of course, there need to be a lot of liaison with local residents. That also is key. I mean, and just on Thea's point about people sitting on walls and annoying her and so on, and of course, I know only too well, dealing with the drug fraternity that permeates, that populates some of our housing blocks in my ward and other wards, is that residents, you do not talk to the police. If you are seen or heard to be talking to the police, then you are going to be in serious trouble. Your life could be in serious trouble. So that is quite often not an option. But if people are sitting around somebody's front across the street, well, you know, we've said to applicants before, well, actually, it would be useful if you actually had someone who went over and said, "Excuse me, but you're annoying the residents here," especially, and obviously if it's your customers. If you see them walking across the road with coffee and sitting on Thea's wall or some other resident's wall across the street, then maybe you might not feel it's a legal duty for you to do it, but actually it's good for your business. And most people will just comply. Say, listen, you know, you're hurting my business. You know, if the licensing people come here, then it's quite likely that I'll get they will give us some kind of warning or whatever. And most people will just move along if you tell them nicely, basically. So it's just to try and make sure that the licensing committee puts conditions in place that covers all of these issues. You can't obviously deal with drug dealers, etc. But I mean, we have a policing team. I try to come down hard on the drug dealing fraternity. It's not easy. It's very dangerous. And
Pat, you're coming up to the end of your time. Anything?
Good. Yes, I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish. So so I think the conditions. I mean, the conditions and the dispersal policy and the management policy on paper look great, but it's how it is translated into actually working day by day by day. And of course, the applicants have got. They were interested in making that work, because if you don't make it work, then some of those external elements that Thea talked about will feel they can leech on your customers and do their business off the back of the fact that your business is there, which damages your business. And you don't want to be back here in the committee or in the committee for revocation. And of course, the committee, I know, wants to have conditions and management plans and agree dispersal orders that minimize to the greatest extent the damage that could possibly be done to local residents, and you've had all of that. So people like me will be watching these premises, obviously, but I'm sure, committee, that you will put conditions on and make sure that enforcement happens, because quite often there are no enforcement officers covering the north like they do in the south, particularly late at night. And by the time people are called in, they're gone, which is why residents need to, of course, make those complaints. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason, and also always really appreciate your input, because you have been on this licensing committee yourself for, gosh, 20 years, I believe. So I always really read your objections and take your objections very seriously. So thank you for that, because of your experience. And thank you for also pointing out that, yes, businesses are needed to recover from COVID as well, and to provide employment as well in this difficult situation we've all been experiencing. So thank you. I have no specific questions. I think you've covered everything that, as far as I'm concerned. Does anybody have any specific questions for any of the objectors at this stage, including the applicant and including Ms. Mahaffey, if anybody has any questions? No.
No.
Okay.
No, thanks.
So now we have finished that part of this hearing, and now we are going to go on to our legal team, Lindsay, to discuss the conditions if the committee were minded to grant this. And I just want to remind all parties that we have received this by email, and this conversation will normally really happen between the applicant and the legal And so, Mr. Faulkner, you need to be responding to this, and Lindsay will not read this out, but you will have seen this document already.
Thank you, Chair. Do you want to take over from here?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as Councillor McVie has explained, we've already distributed the draft conditions to all the parties, so everyone would have had a chance to read them. So what I propose to do is go through the numbering, and obviously my comments are in red, and to ask the applicant whether he agrees to the conditions. So if we start off at condition 1, are you agreeable to the alternative wording in red conditions?
Yes, that's confirmed.
Mr. Faulkner. Okay, so number 2 was a condition you offered, which I don't have any proposals to change. Number 3, I've put in the council's preferred wording. Are you happy with number 3?
Yes, confirmed.
Number 4 wasn't applicable because it was covered in number 3. Number 5 isn't a licensing condition. Number 6 will be referred to in condition 15 below. Number 7 you've offered and I've put no changes in. Number 8, in terms of rubbish being not be deposited outside, are you agreeable with those times, not to deposit rubbish outside between 22:30 and 8 AM the following day?
Yes, I confirm agreement.
Thank you. So conditions 9 and 10 you offered and I haven't changed. And then turning to condition 11, do you accept the council's challenge 25 condition wording?
That's agreed.
Number 12 was one offered by you, but I haven't changed. Number 13 was the Notting Hill Carnival condition lease requested. I haven't changed. Do you agree to that condition?
Yes.
Number 13. Number 14, these are the noise and nuisance conditions now. I haven't made any alterations to that. Are you happy with condition number 14?
Apologies.
So wait.
It's not visible on the screen, but I can find.
Okay, so can you push the screen down? Yes. Right. Number 14. Is it Laura who's doing the? Just bear with us. It needs to go down again. Number 14. No, the other way. That's it. So number 14, the sale and supply of alcohol for consumption on the premises is sold to customers seated at tables by waiter-waitress service.
Yes,
that's what noise and nuisance wanted. Okay. Number 15, this is a noise and nuisance condition, but I've just tweaked it. Basically, consumption of alcohol shall cease and premises shall close to patrons 30 minutes after end of permitted hours. So whatever time your licence bill on sales ends, 30 minutes later, everyone has to be off site. Are you agreeable with that?
That's agreed.
Thank you. Number 16, this is refuse and deliveries. Are you happy with refuse and deliveries not taking place between 11 PM and 7 AM the following day?
Sorry, if you could just bear with me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. So take your time.
For deliveries, we do sometimes have deliveries before 7 AM.
What kind of time would you suggest for the committee to consider?
From 6 a.m. But these are small vans, and they're very quiet. They're not unloading trolleys. It's all delivered by hand.
Okay. Okay, that's something the committee can consider. So that was deliveries, but were you happy with the refuse?
Happy with the refuse. Yeah,
Condition.
the refuse is undertaken by the council. Commercial waste.
Okay, so the following conditions are just additional conditions which I've gleaned from reading all the papers, which I consider were appropriate. So condition number 17, are you happy with that?
So we do have background music inside the bakery. It's at low level and it's not audible from standing far outside the bakery. So
yeah,
keep that, please.
Okay, so that's incidental music, which you're allowed. Okay, so you're happy with that condition, providing it's just incidental music you're playing.
As long as it's incident, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, and condition 18, this is what Councillor Schmetterling was referring to, a dedicated telephone number for the DPS. Are you happy with that condition?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, condition number 9, this is a condition we have on quite a few of our licences about holding meetings with residents. Have a read through it, and are you happy with carrying out meetings twice a year?
I have read through that proposed condition, and I'm happy to agree to that one. Also, okay. I would add that I'd happily meet any residents at any point.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. 20. So the bifolding doors aren't in place yet on Bonchurch Road. Are they to be in place? Is that correct?
No, they are in place now under planning permission.
I think council. Councillor Smetterling's got his hand up. Relevant to this condition, Councillor Smetterling?
Yes, condition 19. The XXX needs to be replaced with some specific addresses or distance from the front door, I think.
Okay, that's a good point. What is the name? Is there? I did try and look at it, but I would believe. What is the name of the residences above the commercial units? And can anybody tell me? Doesn't have to be Mr. Faulkner.
It's Bonchurch Road.
Tudor, can you answer that, please?
It's
Bonchurch Road. Sorry, but what is there a name? What is the name of the residential block above the commercial units on Portobello Road? Is there a name for it or a number?
No, it's literally just 58 to 78 Bonchurch Road.
58 to 78 Bonchurch Road.
That's the building.
Okay.
What's the entrance of the door?
So just
sorry.
What's the number of the door?
So that's the entire block, including the residential, the commercial building. Sorry, Huda. Is that the residential and the commercial element?
That's just the residential element.
Right. And that's directly above all the
flats are directly above the bakery. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful to know. Okay,
may I ask, what about directly?
Are you happy with that, Councillor Smetterling?
Go on.
Yes. What about directly opposite? Just one or two addresses directly opposite. Or opposite.
Perhaps we can look at the map afterwards.
So you've got
directly opposite.
Yeah, that's directly opposite.
Address is 330.
Okay, fine. Obviously, I don't want people to give their addresses live on.
Oh, sorry. Oh well, the front door is on
okay,
Bonchurch Road.
Right, okay.
So it's out there.
Okay. Okay, we'll also check the map afterwards in the post meet to see if there's anywhere else we consider saying. Thank you, Councillor Smetterling. You happy with that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Right, moving on. Thank you. So going back to 20, you said the bifolding doors were in place, and obviously you said having them open creates an ambience and joins the inside to the outside. Obviously there's noise issues. What kind of time would you be thinking that they should be closed, obviously to mitigate the noise issue on Barnchurch Road, Mr. Faulkner?
Thank you. I did propose earlier in the meeting a time of 9:30 p.m, but I've, in hindsight, remembered that the tables and chairs go through the bifold doors to go inside, because they're quite large, the trestle tables. So if they could, if the bifold doors could be closed permanently from 10 p.m, that would help us move the tables and chairs quickly out of the outdoor seating area inside to be stored overnight.
Or we could put a condition that the doors are shut
Fine.
at 9:30. But Lindsay, can we put a condition the bifold doors are shut at 9:30, apart from when the tables need to be removed? Would that work?
Yeah, we can discuss that in the post meet, can't we?
Okay, fine.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you. Going on to 21, you operate a dispersal policy.
That's agreed.
Are you okay with that? Councillors, I'm just trying to think out loud. So there was a dispersal policy, and was there a separate management policy? Or was it just the dispersal policy? You had the operational management plan. Is that the same thing?
No, the operational management plan is separate from the dispersal.
Which policies have you got? Okay. Okay, fine. So I think I will add in another condition saying you'll operate a dispersal policy and an operational management policy. Is that you've got them in place?
Correct.
Okay, lovely. Number 22, obviously this is one that Thea picked up on. All reasonable steps shall be taken to stop patrons congregating on the highway outside the premises or outside the entrance to the flats above the premises. So that's obviously 58 to 7 Church Road. Can I have your views on that condition, please?
Yeah, absolutely. That's agreed.
Fine. Can I bring in Thea at this point? Because I think this was the condition that she was talking about. Can I just have your view on that as well, please?
I think it's great that they're going to stop them standing there, but it doesn't stop them standing outside my property across the road. And people naturally, I've just watched a woman who's had a coffee come up from the table and chairs, cross the road, take a phone call outside my window, have a cigarette, and then go back whilst we've been on the phone.
Okay.
So it's obviously not going to stop that. Whilst I appreciate the council can't do much about it, I do have CCTV, and I don't really relish sort of having to report everything all the time for noise and nuisance. It's the same thing all over again. And as I said, I go to bed at 9 o'clock for reasons of mental health because I've got brain damage. So even the noise of the tables and chairs going out the doors, the people, the cars, that's going to be really disturbing for me. So I'd like to know how they're going to mitigate people not standing opposite my house. I mean, are they going to have to put a member of staff there? And
Can you think of any?
So yeah, the other.
Can you think of any wording that you would prefer?
Okay, they commit to a member of staff standing outside my property, not talking, and preventing anybody from standing there after 9 o'clock at night. They want to police it. I don't know how they're going to police that, what exact wording they're looking for. But something has to be done because you see also I'm on a corner of Munro Mews. So people stand down the back on Munro Mews thinking, oh, isn't this a quaint little bit that hasn't been built on next to the parking? Let me stand and talk there and wake me up while I'm in the bed. So, and then also the front, I'm on a little corner of it, and it's very noisy when people do that and very disturbing to me. And I have post-traumatic stress disorder from having a stalker. So when I hear a noise, I wake up, and I spent 30,000 getting my flat soundproofed. There's not much more I can do on my side to live in peace and quiet. So something has to be done there.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. So we can,
and also the
we can
deliveries
discuss
at 6
that in the post meet and just.
You know, the two other points I want to talk about with the deliveries. Between 9 o'clock and 7 a.m. would be reasonable for rubbish to go out before 9 and after 7 a.m. and the same with deliveries before 9 p.m. and after 7 a.m. 6 a.m. is too early. It wakes everybody up. And
so you're saying restrict the hours 9 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah,
okay,
9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Restrict them. Yeah, that would make me much happier.
Okay.
Because when you get woken up 3 days on the trot, you will
Okay,
feel like
you
in
are.
a normal. Okay, thank you.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, that the councillors can discuss that at the post meeting, but I've made a note of your request. Okay, so moving on to number 23. So the external seating area, so that's on the Portobello Road and the Bonchurch Road. I put shall be clear of patrons between 10 and presumably 7 on Sundays.
That's correct.
And what time the following day?
7:30 a.m.
What time? What time does your pavement licence start? Okay, don't worry, I can check that.
Need to check that.
Okay, so the councillors can take a view on that. Okay, there's 2 more conditions which I've just thought of as we've had the meeting, which aren't on the screen. So if you listen carefully, one's a smoking one and one's a sweeping one. So if you listen carefully, they're short conditions. The first one, patrons and staff shall only smoke in the designated area for smoking. Then obviously you'll need to specify where in reference to a plan at all times. If it was your mention, that should only be on Portobello Road. Can I have your view on that, please, Mr. Faulkner?
Yes, I'm in agreement to that. And just going back to the previous proposed condition, the pavement licence is from 7:30 a.m.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, in relation to the smoking, were you agreeable to the designated smoking area to be on Portobello Road only?
I think there may be a better location that's not on Portobello Road, that's perhaps further up Bonchurch Road, but I think I ought to consider that after this meeting. But certainly making a proposed smoking area, I'm agreeable to.
Can I just jump
fine.
here, Lindsay?
So would that be within? Yeah.
Sorry, Lindsay, just jumping in here about smoking, because when we have smoking policies on alcohol licenses, it's normally relating to when someone's standing outside with a beer and a fag. And I'm not quite sure how it relates to coffee drinkers in the morning and things. And I don't know any advice on that from yourself or Mr. Phelan, I think.
I need to have a think about that in terms of how far we can restrict smoke. Obviously, it will be easier if it was within the red line of the premises. I'll need to have a think about, obviously, if the proposed smoking area is going to be beyond the red line. So,
yeah, and again, if someone gets a takeaway coffee and they're just
I don't know if Mr.
Portobello and they're having a cigarette as they're having their coffee, it's
yeah, there is a limit to how much we can condition. I agree, and obviously, it has to be realistic and enforceable and proportionate, any conditions that we put on the licence. So, okay. So at this stage, Mr. Faulkner, I can't give a precise location. But off the top of his head, he's thinking there's a better location further up Bonchurch Road. But whether that's enforceable or proportionate, I don't know. But I'd have to go away and think of the wording of any condition that you might want to put on, if that's okay. And the last proposed condition, which isn't on the sheet, would be. Yes, I take on board that. That's obviously what the councillors have got to balance up, where the designated smoking area should be. It would have to be agreed by the council. Chair, I think Huda wants to speak.
When you say further up Bonchurch Road, whereabouts does he mean further up? Because that's all the residential area.
It is all a residential area. There's a wide street with plane trees, and potentially they could be asked just to, go for a walk up there. I mean, I haven't, to be honest, I haven't considered exactly where the best location is. So please forgive me for that, and I will take time today to consider where perhaps Portobello Road there's a better place for it. But I'm aware that there are a couple of members of staff who do smoke, and we don't want them to cause a nuisance to any residents living upstairs or across the street or anywhere else. So we do want to find an appropriate place for them to be able to smoke.
Okay.
Thank you. So we have to consider that. Okay. And finally, sweeping. If you listen to this proposed wording, the pavement from the building line on Bonchurch Road and Portobello Road to the curb edge immediately outside the premises, including the gutter channel at its junction with the curb edge, shall be swept and or washed, and litter and sweepings collected and stored in accordance with the refuse arrangements. Are you happy with that?
Well, I think where Bonchurch Road pavement is, it's a particularly wide pavement, so our tables don't go out half as far as the actual pavement width. So we don't have any involvement with that that part of the pavement. I mean, it must be 10 meters plus in width. So I'm not sure that's necessarily appropriate, but certainly on the Portobello Road side and directly in front of the property where the tables are. So inside the red line of the plan would make more sense.
I think Councillor Smessling's got his hand up. Councillor?
Yes, thank you. Let me just get my hand down again. Just 2 points. One is that, I mean, I take Mr. Faulkner's point about the width of the pavement on Church roadside, but on the other hand, wind can sweep stuff off tables all over the place. So one have to consider that, have to think about that, whether one should take that into account. And the second thing is, I think, as we've done in other cases, a road sweeping policy should include frequency, say twice a day, and maybe specify a minimum time between, because otherwise you can do 2 sweeps within an hour. If you don't, you can say 2 sweeps in an hour and you've actually fulfilled your licensing condition. So there needs to be something like, at least 6 hours between them or something like that to be considered. And perhaps Mr. Faulkner would like to comment on that.
Okay, yeah, and I think also Miss Anderson also mentioned she didn't want the noise of sweeping too late at night as well. So if you can factor that into your response, please.
Absolutely, and that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Sorry, Mr.
Can I just, sorry, I'm interrupting rudely without having put my hand up. I do apologise, not following procedure. But the litter sweep is actually also part of any tables and chairs highways licence.
Sure.
So anything within your tables and chairs, you have to look after that area already. So that just clarifies things. I'm not sure if we need to put it as a condition on an alcohol licence. But we do encourage best practice.
Yeah, that's very true, that point.
And I think the litter seems to be more relevant to the takeaway cups and coffees and stuff. So I'm not sure it necessarily relates to the alcohol licence. So basically, Mr. Faulkner, you should be.
No, that's a fair point.
You should be doing it.
Obviously,
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just add one point, is that it's in our interest as a local business to be keeping the pavement tidy outside of our frontage, because it doesn't exactly encourage customers if there's loads of mess outside. So we do regular sweeps throughout the day, and we have a bin for customers using takeaway cups or to drop in just inside the bakery.
Great, that is good to hear. That's good practice, because it's amazing how few places actually do that. So that's good to hear. Thank you.
Well, that's enough from me. Unless there's any other conditions that the council, I haven't got anything further to.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Ms. Lindsay. That's very helpful. I'm just now turning to our governance team. Anne, has anything come up during the course of the hearing that you need to draw our attention to, please?
Nothing from me, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And Mr. Phelan from the licensing team, anything that's come up that we need to know about?
Nothing from me, Chair. I think the late night refreshment was clarified. The need for 10 if they're operating beyond the hours permitted for a supper club was clarified as well. So there's nothing further from me in
That's
terms
good.
of that.
And I know that you were finding out a bit more about the planning, and just to clarify that this premises does have A3 planning use, which is now technically called, I believe, Class E planning use, to be a cafe or restaurant.
That's correct. That was confirmed by planning. They raised no objection to the application. No conditions and no limits in terms of operating hours either. So, yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Phelan. That's very helpful. So thank you all very much for this hearing. We're now coming to the end of it, and appreciate everybody taking their time to be on this hearing and to give their representations and to answer questions and bring specific points to our attention. Thank you very much. So we will now, the committee will adjourn to a private session. In fact, as we won't adjourn, we will actually stop. This hearing now will end, and a full decision will be, a summary decision will be distributed to all parties within 5 working days, please, and then a full decision will follow soon after. So this hearing is now closed. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, everyone.